Hi there, my name is Marlon Harrison, and I'm the founder and editor-in-chief of the Autoethnographer Literary and Arts magazine. And in today's brief presentation, I want to talk about magazine making as a form of collage. So here's an overview of what we'll discuss today. I'll tell you a little bit more about myself, and we'll define the terms magazine and collage before asking the question, can a magazine be a collage? We'll then talk a little bit about my own history teaching with magazines and working with magazines, which led to the creation of the Autoethnographer magazine. From here, I'll talk a little bit about my role as editor and how I see it as a form of collage and what this all means when we talk about publishing in terms of multimodal contemporary desktop publishing. I talk about adopting a collage mindset. From there, I'll end with my references and contact. So I'm Marlon. I'm a veteran college instructor of English and education. I've also been a longtime journalist for digital magazines as well as print. I've started my own magazines. I've worked at other magazines. So I have a long time history with the idea of collating ideas, images, stories, colors and fonts, designing and organizing these types of expressions. So in 2021, I actually founded the Autoethnographer, which is a digital magazine, and it's dedicated to creating a public open source space for creatives to share their personal stories of cultural experience. So at the magazine, we really aim to support emerging authors and artists as well. We're looking for cultural explorations through storytelling, and storytelling can take many forms, right? Dance, art, photography, video. And really, we want to promote cultural diversity and appreciation because we believe that celebrating such creative expressions of cultural diversity can lead to better shared understanding across cultures and positive change. So let's take a look at these words, magazine and collage. So over here, magazine, this is from the Encyclopedia Britannica, and their definition is a printed or digitally published collection of texts, essays, articles, stories, poems, often illustrated, that is produced at regular intervals. And then it talks a little bit about the history of the magazine. Over here in Collage, the Tate Museum in the UK says collage describes both the technique and the resulting work of art in which pieces of paper, photographs, fabric, and other ephemera are arranged and stuck down onto a supporting surface. Wikipedia echoes this with collage as a technique of art creation, primarily used in the visual arts, but in music too, by which art results from an assemblage of different forms, thus creating a new whole. So I think this is important, this idea of an assemblage of different forms creating a new whole. And essentially, when we look at magazine, again over on the left, a collection of texts often illustrated that produces its own whole, which is a magazine. So I'm going to argue right off the bat that indeed we might look at a magazine as a form of collage. Let's go deeper with this. CreativeBlock.com suggests that there are 7 things we might consider when making a collage. The overall composition or arrangement within the actual image, or perhaps within the audio or the video. There's a theme that the collage explores or represents in some way. Contrasts can be used to build tension. In a collage, we can work with pattern and texture. We may incorporate typography or text. We could play with color, and we also might consider the negative image of what is not being added or not being created. So, can a magazine be a collage? Here we see a little image. I actually did a podcast for the Autoethnographer a few months ago with one of our editors, in fact, our executive editor of poetry, Dr. Sandra Faulkner, and we talked a little bit about how collage can actually be utilized in autoethnography. So before I go any further, let me just establish that autoethnography, like ethnography, is a form of cultural study in some way. Autoethnography recognizes that a cultural insider has significant experience, biases, subjectivity, stories, knowledge that can be utilized to help us better understand the culture or cultural phenomenon we are exploring. So in autoethnography, the researcher is often the participant, sometimes the only participant, because that researcher is a cultural insider. So this magazine is dedicated to stories created by cultural insiders as a way for them to illuminate their cultural experiences. Amber Noel Sparks over at HTML Giant is writing about the magazine Collage. And she says that perhaps it's true that any literary magazine could be considered a sort of collage as it layers story, poem, visual, sometimes sound, to produce a bigger picture. So thank you, Amber Noel Sparks, for adding to this idea that yes, a magazine could potentially be, especially a literary magazine. She does suggest that not many literary magazines choose their pieces with the kind of consideration that a collagist themselves might use to cut out shapes, determine colors of paint, so on and so forth. In talking about a special issue of the magazine Collage, she discusses how that editor uses story, review, poem, excerpt, reprint, bios to build layers of text and ideas that add up to something greater than the pieces themselves. The magazine itself becomes a work of art through the process of layering and collecting and collating to produce this bigger picture. David Bennett, who is a theorist about the magazines themselves, famously writes that it is safe to assume that few issues of magazines are actually read in toto, right? In their completion, from cover to ending, every single piece of text or every single image is not necessarily consumed, right? So the reception of the magazine in terms of how a reader, right, receives it mimes its editorial production. So reading is an activity of selection and omission, much like a newspaper, a magazine, a website. We select how we engage with that piece. We omit things that we don't feel we want to engage with. So this produces the text as a spatial or temporal collage or montage of fragments. So our experience of a magazine is similar to the idea of a collage, in that it is an experience of discontinuity, right? We're putting things together. We're randomly attending to things and creating a new whole. Okay, so I want to go back up to about 20 some years ago, where when I was a young ESL or EFL instructor in Japan, I was teaching writing at the college level. And at that point, I had already started my own blog. I was writing a blog. It was the whole beginning of the blogging and online discussion forum world. I had developed a magazine all about fragrance. I had worked for other magazines about fragrance as well. So I had a lot of knowledge about working with this software, and I had this passion and interest in this idea that we could create a class magazine for a writing course in English where everyone could write about topics that interested them, and we would bring it all together along with works of art and student photographs and interviews and movie reviews so that they could see how they were all utilizing English. Beyond that, once I left Japan and I started teaching first-year composition in the United States, I actually began to realize how the magazine could be a wonderful thematic frame for first-year composition. And that, allowing students to be the editors of their own sites, means they're responsible for all of the content and style that they'll need to produce. So it gets them writing around themes that they are inherently connected and interested to, and it gets them really working as a curator in a way of what they would like to put together to create the message, the overall whole that their magazine conveys. So I have played with the magazine in my teaching. I have participated in magazines in the past as a writer and editor. So it's always been there in my head. So one day during COVID, I thought, what if, after years of teaching autoethnography and working at magazines and utilizing the magazine in teaching, and recognizing that after all these years of teaching autoethnography, that there was a need for a publication that would be an outlet for creative autoethnography, it just seemed natural that I would develop the autoethnographer. So here's a little preview of the front page of the autoethnographer. Here is a part of our mission that I mentioned earlier. I'll give you a moment to take a look. Let's go deeper and take a look at some examples from the magazine. Here's an example where we have a singer-songwriter who has produced an audio recording of her song. We presented the audio recording along with her own album cover and the lyrics. We turned that into a video that could be hosted on YouTube, and we have our own video digital opener. As you can see, our logo and name of our magazine there. So all of this is selected and put together, right? It is collated. It is arranged with a purpose that by doing so, the visual and full multimodal experience will add up to something larger than the elements on the page. You can hear Florencia, you can see Florencia, you can read her words. There's image, there's music, there's text. Right? Likewise, we have these special issues, 2 each year throughout the year. Our very first was on climate change. We followed that up with bodily autonomy. Currently, we are hosting a special issue on the theme of queer as well as laughter. But you can see there's a repeating font that is utilized. There's a certain organization of images and the way things are displayed on the page. Again, we utilize our YouTube channel to create videos. There I am, talking about what is autoethnography. We repeat certain images as visual logos. We repeat certain types of presentations of text, such as pull quotes, like you can see down here in the bottom. Here is an article from a student from Jordan writing about her experiences. Again, we've got a visual, we've got the bio, we have the repeating font, we've got the large drop cap first letter. So all of this, I think, indicates that I am adopting a collage mindset as an editor. What does this look like? Well, I pair more than one medium to create a new whole. So for example, the story plus the cover image plus the pull quotes all together equals the experience of the article. Media are combined purposefully with the intent for one to be in conversation with the other. So the images are selected. We don't make the images. We always find license-free open source images, and we always credit the creators of those images. But in our thinking, it's like we are putting one artist in conversation with another artist. And in this way, we also feel like we are creating a collage. So each article and the overall layout contribute to the experience of the whole magazine as a single collage, as Bennett had suggested previously, and as Sparks had suggested in that issue of Collage magazine. So going back again to this creative block, these 7 things that we might consider when making a collage: composition, choosing a theme, contrast, patterns and textures, typography, playing with color and negative image. Let's take a look at the autoethnographer and see what this actually looks like here. So here we have the front page of the autoethnographer. We've got our visual logo, we've got our typography. Our typography is repeated. We have a sense of organization. Our colors are repeated. We use white space carefully. You see images are privileged and selected with great care. Our front page has a nice repetition. Again, we're utilizing white space, typography, color, images, text. So many of the things that were discussed over here, whoops, on the things to consider, right? Composition, theme, contrast, patterns and textures, typography, color, negative image. When we go into, for example, one of the articles, let's open up this one, for example. We can see how things are laid out, how images become a gallery. So pages become almost like museums, in that we can select how we want to engage with these collages or ideas. Video is utilized, right? Here's our opener. We have audio, we have video. At the same time, we can learn more. We've got our pull quotes. Here we have the lyrics, the info about our author. So everything is purposely or purposefully selected here. So let's move forward again. So my argument basically is that I believe a good magazine editor, especially today with the ability for desktop publishing and multimodal publication, really editing a magazine is a lot like crafting a work of collage, especially when a magazine privileges visuals in addition to just simply the literary text. Here are my references from today: Bennett, Tate, Wikipedia, Britannica, Creative Block, as well as HTML Giant. My name again is Marlon. Thank you so much for considering my argument that editing a magazine and even reading a magazine is very much like a collage making process. Feel free to reach out to me at editor@theautoethnographer.com, and by all means do visit us at theautoethnographer.com. Thank you, everybody.